Very good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Kath Smith from NMR, and today we are going to be talking about key performance indicators, 10-year trends using data from 500 milk recording herds. I'm joined today by Dr. James Hanks from Pan Livestock Services, the University of Reading. And just as a quick intro into all things webinar, if this is your first one with us, welcome along. Some of you may be familiar with protocols. So what we do on the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, you've got the question box. So anytime at all, please do ask a question. If you're happy to type it in, absolutely fine. We usually leave them till the end, and then we'll go through all the questions at the end. Alternatively, rather than typing it all in, if it's easier for you, just raise your hand. That is the virtual hand button, again on the control panel. And we will come to those at the end also, but I can actually unmute the line and you can ask your question directly. Okay, so I'd like to hand over now to James to begin our presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Kath. What we're talking about this afternoon is a series of studies that we've done at the University of Reading. We've done 10 now, and so it seemed a very good time to review what's happened, where we're basically looking for a description of the dairy industry, and so we can use the information for various different reasons. There's a link on your screen at the moment, which will take you to a site on NMR where you can download any of this latest report or many of the previous ones as well. So I won't spend too much time wading through it, but it's all there if you want to do so. So what we're trying to do with these studies, obviously to start with, we're homing in on key indicators of performance. So there is a series of parameters. There's about 40 that are documented in quite a lot of detail. The aim is to give you an idea of what is a good figure and what is a typical figure. So there's lots of figures like that, and then we also are very keen to emphasize the variation that there is in the industry. So just because one herd can achieve a phenomenal value, is that an outlier or is that typical? So we're looking also very much at the spread of performance for any one particular parameter. And now that we've done 10 studies, we have 10 years of results. And so how are these changing? How are these parameters changing over the course of those 10 studies? And then finally, what else can we do with this wonderful database that we've got to help farmers and their technical advisors to work more closely and to identify where they need to focus their activities? So to begin with, why did we do these reports in the first place? We don't do them for the fun of it. There was a very clear reason. If you go to any farm, you can always find a cow with mastitis, a cow with a high cell count, a cow with a fertility problem. But what we're trying to distinguish is whether that is an individual cow problem or whether the herd has a problem, and whether they are good or bad. And so what we're really homing in on are the strengths and the weaknesses of individual farms. So we're using milk recording data, and goodness knows how you do this if you don't have good milk records. But so we're primarily looking at strengths and weaknesses. We developed Interherd from many years ago now, and now we have Interherd Plus. When we introduced Interherd Plus back in 2010, we were very good. This is an output from Interherd Plus. We're very good at generating parameters, and so I've got one here in front of you saying the percentage of cows served by 80 days after calving, and we can come up with a figure for this farm. That 67% there is essentially looking at the milk records on this farm for the last 12 months. 67% of the cows that calved, once they'd reached day 80, had been served at least once. So it's a measure. And there's all those ones in that red box there are different fertility parameters. They're not all of them, there are more. But it poses the obvious question then, is that good or is that not good? And when we began, you would be referring back to reports people had done 20 years ago, and it was hopeless to know, and you'd have arguments as to whether it was a good figure or not. So we decided we have to change this, which is where these studies arrived from. You'll see on the right-hand side there, against the parameter, is also a target value, and 68% is a very precise target. and it hasn't been plucked out of the sky. This is what the reports are all about, to give us that figure. It's an achievable figure, and it's important that you understand parameter by parameter how we have done these calculations. So what we basically do is we go to NMR and we basically select, using random numbers, 500 different herds. So you were looking previously at one single herd. If we did that at 500 herds and we took that one parameter, percentage served by day 80, and made a bar chart and arranged them in a descending order for this parameter, then you would see it would look like this. So we have got a few herds with absolutely spectacular figures. We've got herds with not very spectacular figures. The whole point of being selecting herds using random numbers is to ensure that we do get some of the best, some of the worst, and everything in between. And I think you can see from that graph that it does a pretty good job. Another key point here is that all those 500 herds, we've taken the raw data of services and carvings and all the other stuff that comes from milk recording. Each herd we have used exactly the same calculation. So these are not figures that farmers have thought is an approximation, or different pieces of software have generated. Every piece of software will generate it in a slightly different way. These are all calculated in exactly the same way. So they are directly comparable. And these are the figures that we got for 2019. So now if I go and put we've arranged them from the best herd to the worst in inverted commas, because it doesn't mean everybody should be best, but it's you get the idea. So if I then go back to that farm where the farmers have got a figure of 67%, if that farm is in these 500 herds, then that is precisely where that herd would fall. And it gives me a pretty clear idea that we're not brilliant, but we're not at all bad. And I can say at least we're in the top half. So we could improve, but it's not a disaster either. So this is where the idea of targets comes in. We can pick, when we've arranged them like this, the middle herd. So half the herds in 2019 had a figure above 58%, and half of them had a figure below 58%. So we're in the top half, which is good. Not much of a target. So what we do for targets is we break them into quarters, and it's as simple as that. The top quarter of farms in this country, if you use this as a representative sample, are getting a figure for this parameter of 68% or higher. And so we're nearly there, but we're not quite. We also have, we calculate, so that is our target for this parameter for this year. We also then have a difference between what we call the interquartile range. So that 50% of farms are in that area, but 44% is the figure. If you're below that, then you are in the bottom quartile. So it gives us stuff to work on. So taking those figures, the 68 and the 24 here. So we have and you can see as we go down these parameters, we've done exactly the same for all these parameters, calculated them in an identical way. Now, you're drowned under numbers and figures. You can't possibly remember these all the time. So what we do here also is we have a little graphic here. That black line, vertical line there, is the target value. So if this farm was 68%, they're not, they're 67, then the black square, which is their 12-month performance, would be bang on the target line. So this one is bang on the target. Their top quartile, just top quartile. Yeah. So if you look very quickly here, any parameter which is in the green to the right of that target is essentially in the top quartile performance. So this farm is top quartile for these three items up the top here. And similarly, we have a red line, a pink line here, which is the target minus the range. So this, if you like, is the bottom 25%. So down here, I can see the squares that are in the bottom 25%, that are much more important that the farmer and their advisor talk about them than it is talking about these parameters that they're extremely good at.
And what's the blue arrowhead?
I will come to the blue arrowhead in a minute. It's a shorter term measure, and there's a nicer way of demonstrating it than this. But just to finish this, the 67% here, the square is not quite target, so it's just to the left. And so this is something that we're not top quartile, but we're not far off. So at a glance, you can see very, very easily what is this farm good at and what is it not good at. And so if I was going to this farm, the thing that sticks out like a sore thumb is this parameter down here. What is it? Service intervals 18 to 24 days. So that's a measure of heat detection. Basically, the cow is served. If she doesn't conceive, then she should be cycling, and you should spot her one estrus cycle later and then serve her one estrus cycle later, so approximately 21 days later. And if you do that, then you will have got it inside the interval. That happens 20% of the times in this farm, where the target is 44%. So if we put that figure there onto a graph, now that doesn't make a farmer and his advisor sit up a little bit, then we can see that the vast majority of farmers in this parameter are significantly better, doing significantly better than we are. So immediately the question is, well, what are we going to do about it? And using milk recording, we'll be able to follow that through over time. And you can see here that 20% is in the bottom quartile. It's almost, it's under half. The top quartile are getting more than twice as many reservices at the first opportunity in this particular farm. Kath asked about the blue thing, the blue arrows. It's really important with this. This is not a static activity. All these parameters are changing over time, and they go up, they go down, and it's knowing which direction, where you stand at the moment, and which direction you're going in, which is so important. These are the trends, and if you understand your trends, you understand why things are happening, then you're not going to go too far wrong. This is an interherd way of looking for an individual farm at that same parameter, the 18 to 24 day service interval. The black square is where this farm is at the moment. Yeah, so that's now. So that effectively is taking all the services in the last 12 months and coming up with a figure. If we went back a year and took all the services from the previous 12 months, we'd have a figure like that. If we went back 2 years, we'd have a figure like that. So clearly, this year, things have improved dramatically. And the obvious question is, well, why the difference? And almost certainly it will be because somebody at this point said, well, our heat detection is not good enough. They've inserted a heat detection system or bucked up their ideas or something. And as a consequence, the black line is picking up. Now, this is where the blue line comes in. That black, every point on every day, it calculates using 12 months of data. The blue line is 3 months of data. So if I go back to the 1st of January here, this year, so that blue line there is telling me only 3 months. So October, November, December, we take that, the average is approximately 50%. Yeah. If we look at the same period the previous year, so go back to the 1st of January the previous year, we're under 40%. And so the blue is way down here from up here. So clearly the short-term performance now is significantly better than it was a year ago. So as we move to the right, we're dropping worse data, picking up better data, which is why the black line, almost like a super tanker, is moving up in a positive direction. So we can do that for individual herds, any of those parameters. So what's happening to your conception rate, what's happening to your cell count, etc., etc. But why can't we do that now that we've got these 10 studies? We can also do that for all the 500 herds. So in 2019, the target is at 44%. What was it back in 2010? It was 38%. Yeah. So this parameter has basically moved up by approximately 6% over those 10 studies. Now it's important again to emphasize this, that these studies are using, for these parameters, are using the same calculations on the same basic data to generate the figures. So they are directly comparable in 2019 to the figures that we had in 2010. So that is a significant improvement across this large representative sample of milk recording herds. So how might we put that to use? This is the DEW Club, which is the Dairy Early Warning Club, which is the Drove Vet Group in Swindon. And we went there in 2014, and this is a group of 25 farmers. Those are not their names, those are rugby club names, but who are basically members. They have regular routine visits from the vets, and they have regular meetings to discuss performance. So we were able to put their service data, for want of any parameter, in here, and we can then put the target, and lo and behold, 10 out of 25, so 40% of their farmers are beating the target. So 40% are in the top 25% nationally. So that's a very good performance. But in a way, you'd expect a good performance from a group that are having regular veterinary visits. But if we came back in 2017, 3 years later, and now you can see that this is where the herd was last time. This is where they are now. So this is the best performing herd down to the worst performing herd currently. And you can see the variation. So we can now put the target. The target has changed because we've gone 3 years later. It's gone up by 2%, so it's now 42%. But now we've got 14 herds in the top quartile, so beating the national target, current target. So that's 4 more herds than were there before. So that's all very good. We can be very pleased with that. But if we look at I think more important is we look at what the 500 herd studies are telling us, that if nothing had happened, we would expect them to increase by 2% anyway. Everybody's gone up by 2%. But if you look at the individual herds here, some of the performances are absolutely way above them. 15, 13, 15, 10, 9. These are herds that previously in 2014 were sort of very average and now top quartile. Yeah, and it's not just the good herds getting better. It's equally, there are herds that were way down, which are now picking up. They're nearly in the top quartile. So those are significant improvements, and I don't see how you can say that those are not directly the consequence of the collaboration between the vets and the farmers at this place, because how else would you explain such significant improvements? And without milk recording, you'd be hard pushed to explain that. So very, very good indeed. I'm not going to go through all the, you can go through the reports yourself and look at all the individual parameters and how they're changing. But I've got here the current target. So the current top quartile figure for the main fertility parameters. They're all green because they've all improved. Okay, some of them have got bigger. So there's percentage of cows served by 80 days. 11% more cows are being served by 80 days by day 80 now than was the case back in 2010. Yeah, some of them are getting smaller, which is a good thing because calving to first service overall is now, the target is 71 days. Most if you're a top quartile herd, then your cows are averaging 71, having one service by 71 days is the average length of time to first service. But that is more than 2 weeks quicker than it was back in 2010. And you can look at all these other parameters. They're all basically heat detection, as we've covered. I think this one down here, service intervals over 50 days. So that's cows that have been served and then they do get served again because they haven't conceived, but it's more than 50 days later, which basically means usually means farmers are assuming the cow is pregnant when she's not. That has come down dramatically as well. So it's all the fertility parameters seem to be going in the right direction. So that's very positive. There was one actually I should look at. The age at first calving has come down by 0.2 of a year. So again, that's going in. So farmers cows are becoming productive at a younger age. If you put that together, then also some other key parameters such as lifetime yield. So this is cows that have left the herd, but by the time they left the herd, they had been, that's how much milk you were getting for every day of their life, including as a calf. And that has also gone up by about 2 kilos per year since 2010. So we're getting the cows are more productive, more efficient, and so on. The only red ones we've come across really are culling rate, and we're not really in a position to say whether that is farmers actively culling cows younger, or whether this is a consequence of TB, more effective tests, removing more animals, or Johne's disease, farmers tackling Johne's and removing more animals. But it is basically a fact that the culling rate has gone up slightly. Cows are not being kept as long as they were, although there's evidence that is slowing down now, maybe beginning to turn around. But it's a bit of a concern. But I think that's we need more investigation as to why these cows are being culled than we're able to do from the data we've got. One of I think the biggest successes really is somatic cell counts. We now, to be in the top quartile, you have to have a cell count of 136,000 overall, which is anybody who was around 10 years ago. I mean, that is really impressive. And I'll talk about chronics later, but if you come down here, also quite encouraging, the dry period protection. 90% of cows that start the dry period end the previous lactation with a low cell count are starting the next lactation with a low cell count as well. Now it was 89% back in 2010. It's now 90%. So all the reduced use of antibiotics, selective dry cow therapy, there's no evidence that that is having any negative impact on the performance of cows during the dry period. And the dry period cure is perhaps has also improved, so all good stuff. One parameter I'm particularly intrigued with is this one: percentage of cows dried off with no high cell counts in the lactation at all. And to be in the top quartile now, you have to be 54%. That's 11% more. So we have a look at that. Basically here, 11. So in the top quartile, over 50% of the cows do not record a single high cell count in their lactation. And look at the direction of travel on this is really impressive. Even the median herd, so the middle herd, so half the herds out there, a couple of years' time, if we carry on, or 2 or 3 years' time, half of those cows are not going to have a single cell count during the lactation as well. So cell counts are really on the retreat in many ways.
And you can check your own data to see this parameter on Herd Companion. So any recorded herd in Herd Companion, I can show you that later. There's a selective dry cow tool which will indicate percentage of lactations with no high cell counts.
So this is a fabulous statement to, if anybody has any doubts about the quality of the UK milk, and that's a very good one to point to. I'd just like to do a bit more on cell count. This is the national cell count picture where I said the -33 has come down the top quartile. The worst quartile, to be in the worst quartile now, you have a cell count of just under 220. And so, I mean, that was basically almost what the median was 10 years ago. So it's all going very much in the right direction. With cell counts, we've done a lot of work on cell counts, and I just want to spend a little time on this because it's really key. With Herd Companion, for many years now, we've looked at not just the size of the cell count, but the duration. And we broke herds up into a cow. This is a cow who's been milked a dozen times or so. And the red tells me she's just got a high cell count, so it's over 200,000. This one is a high cell count coming in from the dry period. That's called the first, repeats with more. But the key one is this chronic. A cow that has a high cell count is either a new or a first, but then has another high cell count and another and another. All the time this repeat, she is classified as a chronic cow. And I'm not interested in how high her cell count is necessarily, but it's the duration. How many months has she milk recorded since she had this high cell count? Now this is important because if you look, and we do this every year, we look at about 6.5 million milk samples from NMR. We look at them and we go back and say, well, what sort of what category was the cow that gave those milk? And if we look at the high cell count milk in 2018, over half of it, and it's always over half, was coming from these chronic long-term high cell count cows. That's where the problem is, and so that's what we've got to try and reduce. And we also did some very interesting work with various vets on the correlation there is between the herd cell count and this parameter. How much of your milk is actually coming from this type of cow? So this was a typical herd, a high cell count, and 19%, 283 of the cows were chronic, and the herd cell count is 283. Why is this important? Because again, with all of NMR's data, we were able to grab 4,000 herds one time back in 2010, I think it was, and plot exactly that. So that farm with 19% chronics and a cell count of 283 would be sitting here. So look at the correlation that we have between, you have more chronic cows, you have a higher cell count. It's as simple as that. And this 72, this basically tells me that nearly 3/4 of the variation in the herd cell count can be explained by how many chronic cows you're keeping. So how do we turn that into a message? Well, it's very simple. We just say, right, if you control your level of chronic cows to below 10%, now have a look at that group. How many of those are being penalized for having high cell count? You're penalized at 200,000 for sake of argument. How many of this cohort are being penalized? Well, we've counted them for you. and it's about 9%. So if you get below 10%, you're going to have your you've got an under 10% chance of being penalised. But keep a few cows that you know you shouldn't, and high cell count, repeat high cell count cows. It doesn't take long to edge up to 15%, and when you're up there, now how many of that cohort are being penalised for high cell counts? And it's gone up from 9% to 92%. Now, when we did this back in 2010, 40% of herds were keeping more than 15% chronic cows, and only 1 in 4 was right down at this level. We take the latest figures that we've got from the 2019 500 herd study. So this is only 500 herds, but it's exactly very repeatable. Still 73% explanation here. This 41% of herds keeping more than 15 has dropped to 13%. So the message has really got through that chronic cows are your problem. And if we go here and look, well, how many of the herds now have less than 10% chronic cows? That has dropped dramatically. Sorry, I got up here. How many these chronic cows? Only 1, 2, 3 out of all of those that are high chronic cows. So 95% of them are being penalised. We have no idea how many antibiotics or anything else they're doing, but you're almost certain to be penalised. But those who've managed to get down here, they now represent 62%. So nearly 3 times as many are now in this below 10% level. And how many of those are being penalised ostensibly? Is still 6%. So it's a really stark difference between you keep more chronics, you're going to get penalised. And this isn't a one-off, because we've done this every year, and you can see the 41%, 35, 30, 29. It's come down steadily, and the clean cows and low levels of chronic cows has also gone up. You still got chronic cows. What happened the next month to this one? What happened the next month to this one? And basically, if you remember 50%, about half of the cows that start an infection or come in from the dry period with an infection, half of those will go low at the next milk recording. But when you get to chronics, that isn't half, it's about 15%. So they're very good at self-cure, but if they don't get self-cured, then they need help, because they're not going to do it on their own. And we set a student at Reading, a very nice little study, details below, but of this recovery, where we looked, it was another 30, from the 500 herds actually, we took about 30,000 high cell count records, and we looked at the next milk recording of those cows. So these are the new and the first, and it followed exactly the same. This is a very low, below 250, this is a very high. So a very high cow coming with a very high cell count as a new or a first, still more than half of them are going low at the next milk recording. So the highest cell count of those, when you compare that to the chronics, this is a cow that has had a very low cell. It's still only no higher than 250, but it's the second in a row. Less than 40% of those are going to recover. So it's significantly lower. And if they have 2 chronics, it gets worse. The higher the cell count, it gets worse. And so it's exactly as you would expect, but there is this very marked difference. It's the chronics that matter. It doesn't matter if it's a high cell count chronic or a low cell count chronic. It's a chronic, and it needs looking at and working with. And then the chronics, you get less chronics coming through, and your herd cell count goes down. Very simple. We also look at mastitis. It's a little bit more difficult for us with 500 herds, because we depend then on the farmer to record mastitis events. So what we tend to do is we look for herds that keep reasonable amounts of mastitis. We don't believe anybody's got none of it. So herds that keep have more than 5 cases per 100 cows, that sort of rate, we include them. And there are 250 of the 5, so about half the 500 herds would come among that in that category. And when we look at that, it's really difficult to say there's a massive mastitis problem. The money goes here, but is it such a massive problem when 3/4 of the herds that we do have records for have below 48 cases, less than 1 case a week. And this is cases, this is not cows. You often find on a herd, you'll find that one particular cow the farmer will not get rid of. It's had 8 or 9 of those 50 cases. So it's not a massive problem. There are, of course, it's a welfare problem. Of course, there are herds, but maybe the best thing people can do to control mastitis is to record it properly, because we can't see much evidence of it getting out of hand. And yes, mastitis is coming down slowly but surely, but we've only been doing this since 2016, so those are not such bad figures. So mastitis is going in the right direction as well.
And we do collect mastitis cases and lamers for that matter, as part of the recording day without no extra cost or anything like that. So yeah, cases to your recorders, please. Please,
that's all you have to do. If you get it to NMR, then we've got it, and then we can we and your technical advisor can help you interpret it. And just as an aside here, every year the 500 herds, we also look at how much mastitis is there on the farm, cases for every 100 cows, and what's the herd cell count. And we really struggle to find any correlation between having a high mastitis causes you a lot of cell cancer. So we've done it every year, and it's flat basically. I think we've given up now. But basically, you just because you got lots of, if you control mastitis, it doesn't mean you're going to control your herd cell count. Whereas if you control your chronics, you will control your herd cell count. So the other thing we've brought in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, really, we're starting to look now at Yonis, which is obviously a massive issue for the industry that we need to be on top of. And of the 500 herds that we look at here, 233 of them have been Yonis testing quarterly, not just once in a while, for more than 2 years. So we've grabbed those as our representative, our sample of Yonis testing herds. And if we look, what we're looking at here is how many of the cows in each of those 232 cows are classified as J5. Now, basically, without spending time on that, it basically means that they've had a couple of high test results for Yonis. You're very unlikely to have a high, an incorrect, a false positive. Chance of having 2 false positives is virtually nil. And if they have NMR, if there are 2 positives within 4 tests, so 2 in a year, then essentially that animal is Yonis positive and should be removed, and she stays as J5 for life. So this gives us an indication of how many J5 animals there are in the herds, and what is a figure. We've actually got 21. Only 6% of the herds had none of these J5 animals in the herd at the current time. There are some herds have got huge numbers, and it's a bit of a concern. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops over the next few years. We've actually, of those 500 herds, 105 of them have actually been milk recording for 7 years now. So that's become that's a really good data set for us to have a look at. And this is my colleague Nick Taylor at Reading did this for me. This is the percentage of all the animals that's tested. So since about 2013, we've been is about 6% not tested. So over 90% of the cows are tested. So this is a history of what's going on in those 105 herds. And there was definitely a rise in J5. So it did in all these infection levels. It seemed to peak in about 2015. September 2015, but since then it seems to be moving in the right direction, and we can but hope that this will carry on and head towards 0.
So we don't know what was causing that peak, James, right in the middle of the graph?
We don't, but it would suggest these 105 herds behave like this. Now, whether that's how many herds have got an increase, and whether that's across the board or whatever, we haven't had resource and time to look at. Okay, another way of looking at it, which might be, I find quite useful when talking to farmers anyway, is you can count how many times an animal has a high test. So if you have 1 high test, we can argue about whether that's a mistake or whatever. 2, it's highly unlikely that it's a mistake. You've got a Yonis animal there. 3, 4, 5, I'm sorry, there's no question you're in denial that you've got a Yonis cow. So what we're doing here is just looking at, well, how many herds are, what percentage of cows in a herd have more than 2 positive Yonis tests. So there are quite a lot of herds with 5 or 6% of the cows have had 2 or more tests. A lot of herds down here that 20% of the herds don't have anything with more than 2. I think 2 is fair, because you could serve a cow and then she goes high, and then by the time she's calved she'll still be high. So it's a bit, 3 is being fair, I think. So, but really this is something that when you're up at this level, there are too many animals with repeat high Yonis tests. It's a very simple thing to look at. It's a very simple thing to put right. So and again, I'd like to go back to the idea of this isn't just the farmer's responsibility. This is I feel this is a vet practice responsibility as well. So why not have the clients of a vet practice? So this is pooling 10 herds together now, okay? And there's your J5 level now in this vet practice. These are not tested. These are all negative. These are blah, blah, blah. And these are J5. Sorry, I've gone back up. And this is the position they were 2 years ago. So what's changed? And so who's responsible for making it change? Should is that the farmer's fault? Is that the vet's fault? Is it, why are you testing if you're not getting any better? So again, you should be, then you can dig further down. And if we look at this collection of herds I've got here, you can find how many cow have highs by Yonis tests. And in this sample, we've got cows with 14 high Yonis tests. They are out there. How many of those are pregnant? And again, you've got in this practice, we've got 1,200 cows pregnant, of which quite a few of them have had repeat high Yonis. So it's a sort of thing. Next step, there is a problem, right? Move on. Let's see. First of all, we'll get the pregnant cows out and sort them out, and so on and so forth. And another area is, then you can, as a practice, you can look at your different herds and see, well, which herds is it that are really not getting anywhere or not doing anything about having high cell counts. And you can see the contrast between herds that are clearly working on getting Yonis down and herds that are testing but just not doing anything with the results. So again, Yonis is work in progress, but we have this fantastic database of herds, and you can home in on the individual animals or herds or whatever it is that are causing the grief. And I think that's it. I would like to very much acknowledge my colleague Mohammed Kosabati, who really is the number cruncher on all of this, all of these studies. He does a fantastic job and does incredibly detailed, which is why we have such confidence in what they're showing. And also milk recording farmers, because if people don't milk record, we couldn't do any of this. But hopefully you will be the people who will also benefit from the findings of all of this. So there we go. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, James. Now, before we go to questions, I do have a little poll here, just purely for to hear about this kind of information. There we go. Oh, so it's lovely. If some of you could just press the button on your screen now, that would be excellent, just to see, did you hear about it from an email, which looks like most of you have, or through some other route? That would be great, or perhaps through Canvas. So this will just enable us to, direct contact you better in order to, share the news with any future webinars that we may do. That's brilliant. So most of you have voted. Thank you very much for that. Oh, just bear with me. There we go. So yeah, direct mail, that's fantastic. So we'll continue to keep you informed of future events through email. Thank you. Right, so on to questions.
I'm here, that's good.
Excellent. Okay, one from Anna. Is it possible to show us how to reach the Yonis high in life on Interherd for your farms? Yeah, so using Interherd Plus then.
This is, yes. Oh, I haven't got it open, but do I
Can we go in? Yeah, can we go in quickly?
I'll have to, I don't know what farm I've got lined up on it. If in Interherd Plus, if you go reports and there is a Yonis disease analysis report, and that basically gives you all the animals. It lists the animals not in numerical order, but by the number of high Ionis tests that that cow has had in its lifetime, and you should be able to see the animal, which animal, and you can either have high or low, or you can have the actual test number for all the tests in that animal's life, and it will be in descending order of that of the number of high Ionis tests in the life. So
yeah, so Anna, that's reports on your Interquartile Plus, then reports from the main menu, and then Ionis analysis there. Depending on what version you're on, so if you can't see that menu, then do give us a call, because it might be we need to update you on that one.
I can show, but I don't know which herd. I haven't got it open, so I wouldn't know what.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
Yeah.
Right, just checking any more questions, or if you want to raise your hand, just click on the hand button. I'll just give you a minute to have a think about that. Okay, any other comments or queries? If you've got a suggestion for a future webinar related to this topic or interherd or anything NMR. Oh, we've got one from Amy. Right, just bear with me, Amy. I shall unmute you. Hi, Amy Jones.
Hi. I was just wondering if the increase in Ionis for those 2 years could be an increase in recording, or is that have you taken that into account?
No, it can't be, because that's why. Let me go. It's the cows. It's the cows that have been the 105 cows that have been testing for 7 or 8 years. So this is the same cow, the same 105. They've all been testing for 7 years. So they were all testing before, during, and after that period.
It's hard to explain then, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I'm not trying. I don't try to. We only really noticed it the other day, and we thought, well, that's interesting. It's, that would be good if somebody has any idea as if somebody can explain that to us, and then or has an idea that we could explore the data set in more detail. That's precisely the sort of thing we would be very interested to follow up.
Brilliant,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome. There we go. Any more questions for James? Oh, here we go from Sharon. Why is Ionis not compulsory on all animals?
What do you mean? No, these non-tests usually are heifers or newly before the animal they've calved, but they haven't had their first test yet.
I suspect she means.
Is that what you mean?
As a general.
Okay. Well, I must declare that I'm not a veterinarian, so that is way out of my comfort zone, and I would very much leave that to the veterinary profession to argue that one.
Decide, yeah, it may go that way, Sharon, but yeah, on all milking cows, that's
yeah, I would. I mean, it's clearly something that is coming. People are, some milk buyers are getting more and more serious about this whole not taking milk from cows that have had high Ionis tests. It's something that I can't believe it's a thing you should ignore, and especially if you are really low. The other thing I haven't talked about is you've got your cows that have got Ionis, but who are the offspring of those cows? So if you've got heifers, should you be introducing heifers of cows that went on to produce Ionis or to have Ionis or not? And it's there's no right or wrong, yes or no, but it's all information that is there, and you should be able to use that in making your management decisions, and whether it's worth the risk or not worth the risk, and so on and so forth. So we're providing the stuff for you and your technical advisors to work on.
great. Thank you, Sharon. Question from Gareth. I see you raised your hand. You've typed in your question now. That's brilliant. Any regional variation in the Ionis classification?
That's not one for me. That's the thing about the 500 herds, Gareth, is that we don't know who they are. We don't want to know who they are. We don't know where they are either, and that's they are anonymous as far as we're concerned. So we have to be careful on that. We would have to do we would happily we would have to look, but I wouldn't want to know who these 500 herds are, because I think that would be wrong. So, but is there a regional? I mean, it's good. Yeah, that's a good question, and maybe it's something we should talk about. My colleague Nick Taylor has just written something because he's the one who did the graph here. The rise in Eunice disease. The only speculation we made was that the rise did follow an increase in cow numbers across the 105 herds. So it could have been bought-in disease. So there's a possibility. Now that we could go back and explore in more detail. Are we buying in, loads of cows that we shouldn't be buying in? I mean, it's certainly a complete minefield, and you can look at that. We then assume the decrease subsequently is a result of targeted culling. Yeah. So maybe there were cows were brought in, and then the culling is people are getting on top of it, but hopefully that drop in the red line now is good news and will be carrying on for a good while.
Great. Parameters for J4 and J5 animals from Jane. Do you know
Jane, can I ask you to go download the document, and it's right at the back, the appendix on Eunice disease. All the definitions are in there word for word. J4 is essentially, off the top of my head, is the first time that a cow goes high. So if you test a cow and it's never had a high before, and it suddenly gets a high result, then that is a J4. And when she's had a second high, if it's within a sequence of 4, then she's a J5 for life. So J4, if you then go back to, it depends what happens at the next recording. Please go and have a look at the details in the report.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Question from Fiona. Are the only tested herds for this data then all testing all animals, which would be herd-wise?
No, it's not the 30 cow screen. These are all animals for the all animals for and quarterly. Yeah, so 105. We're just very fortunate. I mean, of those 500 herds we've had, I didn't say about 100. When a herd drops out for any reason, we replace it again, of course, with a random one we've selected using random numbers. About a third of the herds that we're using have been here since 2010, but these 105 are ones that have been testing for 7 or 8 years, so which is about as long as you've been able to. So very impressive.
Brilliant. Keep your questions coming, people. This is great. So Richard just looked at the average farm gate milk price. Rise in Eunice looks to follow the fall in milk price. Low milk price, lower inputs. Animal overall energy health status compromised.
Questions. Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, we'd be really interested to follow that through, because there's something happening there, but what it is, I don't think we're in the I mean, the other one is the culling rate. I'm a bit, would be lovely to know more about the fact that why more cows are getting culled. Is that something that is how much of that is involuntary culling, like TB and Eunice, and how much of that is management culling, if you like. And I would, because you do see, looking at the cell count stuff, it's so frustrating when you go and look at these chronic cows, and you'll find a cow in her 4th lactation whose previous lactation she had a dozen milk recordings, never had a high cell count. Current lactation, 10 out of 10 high cell counts. And you sort of think, well, that's a really good cow, just about to make massive profit for you, and you're going to have to get rid of her because you didn't look after her cell count early on. There's a lot of that goes on, but we don't know the whole picture of culling, certainly.
Great, thank you, Richard. Right, any more questions, anybody? Or if it's easier, as I say, you can press your hand button and ask it directly. But yeah, it looks like from our answers, we perhaps need to do more studies on specifics of region, if that's of relevance, or causes as well. So that's one for future times. Okay, looks like we're all clear on the question side. So thank you all very much for.
Our emails are at the back anyway, aren't they? So,
yeah, that's it. So shall we just go, if we go back to that screen?
Oh,
there we go.
So there's me, and there's Kath, and there's Seamus Heaney as well.
Yeah, so do drop us a line if you've got any future comments, further comments, or any ideas for future webinars as well. That's brilliant. Or any questions on Interherd Plus in general. Thank you very much, and thank you, Sharon, and thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you.